Welcome back to the top 10 series. Today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 trees. Let's get right into it. First up on the list is St. Mocianne's Arboretum. And as we go through the dungeon, you will see that it grows way deeper than it seems on the surface. This, for me, is one of the coolest large trees we have in here. Anytime they have a dungeon focusing around things like these, I find them a lot more interesting than just a giant tree in a forest. Not to say that we won't be looking at those later. Before you even enter this dungeon, you're immediately greeted by the tree. And as you enter it, that's all you're going to see in the background the entire time is this tree. The roots of these trees are almost nonsensical, the way they just go upright and then straight down, evading the water for some reason, but eventually getting to it. One could argue that maybe these tree branches are being manipulated by the people who work in here to do something. I don't know, but it sure does look cool. Could be techniques that you see people use when they're making bonsais to redirect branch trees. I don't know why they would want to redirect the roots specifically, but it does make for a really cool aesthetic, even if it doesn't make much sense. Once the tree goes out of sight, you have to go through almost the entirety of the dungeon till you see it again, all the way past the beehive that we'll probably take a look in another video because it's very cool. We end up being greeted by the tree again with these god rays piercing down. And then in this level, the water from the various ponds up above are actually crashing down, creating this very cool light waterfall to them. Down on here, you can see some very strange devices. Maybe they were experimenting on it and inserting some sort of chemicals into it to enhance its size. Or maybe these are simply just spigots, like you would see on a maple tree. Maybe they're harvesting some sort of ether from them because we have this very strong blue glow here. My bet is they're probably manipulating it with some sort of chemical product to make it the massive size that it is. And all the way at the end of this dungeon, in the boss room, we end up going inside the tree, underneath it. Makes for a very cool final boss arena for this dungeon. And I'll touch briefly on the hard version of this dungeon, which we didn't end up getting till the expansion after. Very bizarre. They really need to bring back hard dungeons. They were very interesting. And we see that the entire tree is now hauled out because everything in this dungeon has started to rot due to the neglect and absence of its carekeepers. Overall, just a very cool big tree and a lot more context to it outside of ones that we see in other areas like Central Fanland and various trees in Rak'tika Greatwood. Just any other big tree really that you see out in the open area, we usually don't get to interact with them as much as we do this one. At number 9, we're heading to Oizys. Oizys. The trees we're looking at in this area are these very odd maple trees, as far as I can tell. It seems to be a blend of multiple trees. The leaves on closer observation are definitely some sort of maple leaf, but then we have these hanging vines dripping from them, like you would see more in a jungle, and then the actual bark, the actual trunk shape of this tree feels more like something you would see in a savanna. Very wide-reaching, low-profile trees. We even have this more stark white color to its barking, more like a birch tree you would see. I really love the contrast of this one, the whites and the red. The gravitational forces are so wild in this area that they get to this really cool effect with the leaves kind of floating away on them, suspended in midair, and even seeing some of the trees completely sideways on islands. Very goofy, very silly area. And number 8, we have another silly one. This one is in eastern Noscea. On top of these bungalows, we have these palm trees protruding from all of them. And this main bungalow, bungalow tent, what'd you call this? Probably call it a tent or a bungalow. It's close enough to something like that nature. We get these palm trees that we were never meant to actually come up to and look at because this was in a 2.0 era before we even had flying as an option, and they came back and allowed us to fly in all these areas. Sadly, you cannot land on top of here despite it being actually just terrain from their terrain tool that you see around. There is no actual landing part on here. There's collision, like you can't walk through it, but you cannot land on it. And in some of the footage, you'll see I'm actually looking under it, and you can see just how deep the roots would be able to go in this. Would it be enough to sustain this? I don't know. I find this one really funny just because who's coming up here to take care of it? While it looks really cool, the absurdity of it is just brings up a lot of questions to the actual function of how it's staying alive up here, especially fighting the other tree up here with it for sustenance in what is very little soil. So at some point, somebody has to come up here, change out the soil, make sure the trees don't fall over. Just a lot of chaos with all the ideas you can think of with somebody having to maintain this for the pompous little brat Gegaruju downstairs. And this one just makes for a great sight, something you would see in a fantasy vacation spot. I did just recently cover this on my other series, if it's something you're interested in as well. Coming up at number 7, we're heading over to Yanxia, specifically to the Valley of the Fallen Rainbows. Here we get to see this very strange interpretation of red Japanese pines, or what appear to be red Japanese pines, but they also took the liberties to make these have very over-the-top bonsai techniques applied to them, where normally we would see curving outwards up. These ones curve straight back down. Not something you would really see happen in bonsai very often, is going straight back down. This one, it's hard to think of any logical reason why these trees would need to grow straight back down. I think it's just purely aesthetic. With Yanxia having so many different Asian cultures mixed into it, I think they just wanted to have fun with these ones. And fun they did. Even having some of these grow out of the ground and then straight back into the ground in a little N shape. Coming up next, we're heading to Euphrosyne and seeing the world tree created in part by Noscea the matron. Here we get to see a depiction of the world tree, like we see in various Norse and Greek mythologies. As it's really cool as we go for this first part of the dungeon, we get to see the forming of the world tree and all the islands and nature around it. In the lore, it talks of Noscea being as lonely when she wanted to create her own playmates, which is how she ended up bringing the world to life and how we got this. There's not much to really say about this one outside of diving deep into the lore of the 12. Overall, it's just a really beautiful sight to see in this one. And we don't really see video games depicting the world tree like this as this floating monolith in the distance, kind of bathed in all these god rays. Usually it ends up just being a big tree. So this is a very refreshing take on the concept. Coming in at number 5, we're heading over to the Dravanian Forelands in the Chocobo forest to see these very bizarre trees. They seem like they might be related to cypress trees in some way. The anatomy of these trees brings up a lot of questions as to what this ecosystem used to be like, maybe in a past time. We get these extremely exaggerated stilted roots. Usually these are found in areas that are nutrient poor, but looking here, everything is quite vibrant in this location. It could also be something similar to what we see in various swamp trees, where we have these refortified roots that help the tree survive the harsh currents. Maybe these trees had a lot of predators that would cause them to evolve in such a strange way. I like to think that at one point, this area may have just simply been flooded deeply, and now the trees just have to live with the situation they're in now. The way these trees create this naturally exaggerated shelter, I find really interesting. The reason I think this area may have been flooded before is in the center of all these, you can actually see additional roots growing out of the center of these. So maybe it's possible these trees, when they first start growing, are normal looking trees, but then the roots exaggerate out and create this weird buttress as it grows further. It's hard to really say exactly what's happening here. Even stranger about these trees is they seem to have these smaller branching trees growing out of them, almost like they're buds on a tree, but this seems to only happen at the base of these massively stilted roots. A lot of strange design choices with these ones that I wish we could have a little more insight as to what they were thinking when they were designing these. I wonder if they literally just said, make me the weirdest tree you can think of. And they definitely succeeded here. even in some areas, we can see these massive stilted roots growing out farther into different areas. Despite growing the way they do, they probably still have chocobos eating them, hence the name of the chocobo forest. So maybe their evolution traits ended up being for nothing at the very end of it all. And number 4, we're heading to South Shroud to this massive stump. The absolute size of this tree is insanely big. This one seems to even rival the size of other trees we saw in various Endwalker dungeons. I love to think of what this tree looked like before the calamity struck it down. This entire tree stump is surrounding the lost city of Amdapor. So I wonder if this was somewhere they lived inside the tree, or if the tree was already dead by the time they occupied this location. Going inside the lost city, we can see another perspective of it. This is another really cool one where we can actually see more of this massive tree when we go inside the dungeon and see the walls in the distance. Heading over to Wanderlust in Dohn Mheg, we get these really odd mushroom trees. I couldn't find these anywhere else in Shadowbringers when I was looking around. The first place I checked was Mheg, and there was nothing really over there, even anywhere like these trees. In fact, there's just a lot of trees in Dohn Mheg that are quite unique looking, as well as other various flora. Looking closer at these ones, you can see the convex mushroom top of these very saturated cyan leaves scattered about them, which from a distance would make you think it was a mushroom. This one seems to resemble a king oyster mushroom, since a lot of the things in Dohn Mheg are illusions, as well as mostly the castle. It comes to thought, maybe these actually are just giant mushrooms, and we just aren't seeing them as they truly are. Or they could just not exist at all. It's really hard to say. I really recommend going through this dungeon in Explorer mode because there's just so much really cool flora to look at in this dungeon. Though, sadly, you don't get to see the first section of this dungeon in the nighttime scene when in Explorer mode. Over in Elpis, we got a place with an exorbitant amount of enthralling various flora, notably trees, which is why we're here now. We're taking a look at this specific tree, which, as far as I could see, is only in the Caphonic Horns. I didn't see it anywhere else, though there could be something similar to it in other regions of Eorzea, since this is a facility where a lot of the first flora we saw became to end up what it is. These being in the Caphonic Horns implies that these were crossbred naturally and not grown using any magics. Despite the location of these, they really remind me of Strangler Figs. And the reason I say that is normally Strangler Figs grow the way they do with these winding, twisting bark roots segments in order to fight for photosynthesis in very dark forests or places without very intense light sources. But here, there's plenty of room for that. In this area, we also see some topiary and some shrubs. So maybe they manipulated these trees with bonsai techniques, like we saw some of the other trees. But given the Caphonic Horn's research purposes, that seems unlikely. So as to why these trees would grow like this, it's really hard to say in an area with so much light, which is why I find them so interesting. Maybe this is an exaggerated occurrence of a strangler fig becoming a columnar tree, which is where the central core becomes hollow. If this is the case, that's a very sneaky way of going about showing off a strangler fig. If we do look at the top of these trees, though, they do appear to be separate branching trunks, all just twisting together, which just brings up even more questions as to why all these trees would colonize like this. In the end, I just think they were just doodling away, and this is what they ended up coming out with. And last but not least, we're heading over to Fanow, and this time I'm gonna cheat a little bit. And there's nothing you can do about it. I'm cheating. Because this one is not one individual tree, but many trees. It is more of a forest, one might say. And the trees we're looking at are the ones suspending Fanow up in the air. I really like Fanow. It's a very compelling way to give a nod to Final Fantasy XII. We get all these reflections of the Iria village in its design, with these encircling platforms surrounding individual trunks and branches, and ramps of the branches being used as paths to get up and down for the areas. One thing I did find really funny about this area is the central pillar where the aphrodite is not actually a tree trunk. It's just a big landmass. I don't know why they didn't just make this a giant tree stump. I think visually that would have looked a lot more pleasing to the eye. But I guess it's not something you really notice unless you were a Zerbian like we are right now. There's quite a bit of funny architecture in this area as well. We can see these supporting ropes trying to hold up the platforms, but they're quite skinny and thin. So I can't imagine they're being very helpful, Al, but instead just providing this really pleasing aesthetic with all these ropes tied up to this area. Even the stairs have these really cool beams underneath the central parts, giving this added support to all of them. Thank you for watching this video on the top 10 trees. If you want to watch more of my videos, here's more top 10s right here. Here's another video on the bottom here. And don't forget to subscribe. Well, that'll do that. Bye-bye.